My name is Jeff Wilson. By day, I invest in tech companies, and at night, I invest in sports cards. Join me on my journey to profit from the hobby we all love. Hello, sports card investors, and welcome to another episode. Today, 5 mistakes that I made as a new sports card investor. Because yes, even the great sports card investor here is not perfect. No, in fact, I made a number of mistakes as a rookie investor getting into sports card investing, and I want to share them with you today in hopes that I can help you avoid some of these mistakes that I made that ended up costing me a lot of money. And that's not a good thing. So let's avoid that for you so that you can be a better new sports card investor than I was in the early days. So my number 5 mistake, assuming everything I pulled new out of a pack would grade Gem Mint, assuming it would grade PSA 10 or BGS 9.5. Sadly, that is not the case at all. Grading is a lot more complicated than just pulling something new out of a pack and sending it off and expecting a Gem Mint grade in return. You see, some of the boxes that I opened after I had gotten back into the hobby for not a very long period of time, I pulled some good cards out of them. I opened up a box of Spectra and I pulled a Josh Allen pink number to 15, very beautiful card, an RPA of Josh Allen. And I said, it's a beautiful card. It looks like it's in great shape. I just pulled it brand new out of a pack. I'm going to send it in to get it graded. It graded a PSA 9. I then opened up a couple of boxes of National Treasures basketball from 2018, brought those out, and I pulled out a couple of beautiful RPAs, an RPA of Troy Brown Jr., and an RPA of Robert Williams III. They looked in great shape to me. I sent them off to PSA to be graded, and they both came back PSA 9. Not my Gem Mint 10 that I was hoping for. I then opened up a box of Flawless. This was a box of 2016 Flawless, and out of that box of Flawless, I pulled out a beautiful Carmelo Anthony dual patch auto card that I thought looked great, and PSA thought it was an 8.5, even worse. This card, by the way, by grading something as an 8.5, if I were to sell this card on eBay tomorrow, it would sell for less money than if the card were never graded in the first place. And oftentimes, PSA 9s sell for right around the same price as if the card were never graded, maybe slightly more, but not much more than if the card were never graded in the first place. So if you are collecting or investing in modern cards and you're going to send them off to get graded, you want to make certain that you have Gem Mint cards that are going to grade out as a 10 from PSA or a 9.5 from BGS, or you are really wasting your time. And it's not just about looking at the corners. It's not just about looking to make sure that there, is no obvious things wrong with the card. Centering makes a big difference. This is another mistake that I made. Look at all of these Lonzo Ball cards that I bought shortly after I started investing. All these raw Lonzo Ball cards, a lot of these are silvers. This is a ton of Lonzo Ball cards. And guess what? Almost every single one of these cards is off center. And I didn't realize it when I bought it because I didn't pay enough attention. I was looking at the high resolution photos and I was looking for corners and the corners look good. And I looked for scratches and I didn't see scratches, and I looked for edges and I didn't see edge problems. I didn't realize at the time how big of a deal centering was, and the fact that a lot of Prism cards and a lot of modern cards in general are not well centered. And if it's not well centered, it's never going to grade as a Gem Mint. Some of these cards are horrendously centered that I bought. And with Prism in particular, a great hack to tell if your card is centered or not is to count the number of little dots on either side of the card, and it actually helps you understand if your card is centered by counting on the number of dots. You, of course, want an even card with an even number of dots on both sides of the card. And if you look closely at most of these cards, they're not centered at all. A couple of them are. Most of them were not well centered, and none of them would grade well if I sent them off for grading. So here's what I do now. This is how I have solved my first problem as a sports card investor. It's this little guy. You got to go real nerdy. If you're really going to get into understanding grading, you got to go real nerdy. This is a cool, lighted, you flip it on here. It's got a light inside. This is a lighted, magnifying tool, and you get real close to your card to hold it up to see exactly what is happening with your card. You literally do this. You go over top of your card. You get an amazing view of the surface. You need to make sure that there are no surface scratches anywhere on the card, because when you send it off for grading, by the way, they put these cards under intense magnification just like this, and they go over them just like this to look to see if there are any surface issues, any surface scratches. Then they're going to look at each corner to make sure that that corner is super sharp. Then they're going to look at the edges of the card to make sure there's no dents or dings along the edges of the card. And then finally, they're going to look at the centering, and they're going to look at the front, and they're going to look at the back. Getting yourself a tool like this is going to save yourself a lot of trouble if you're planning on sending a lot of stuff off for grading. What it will do is give you a much better chance when you do this and the card passes your test and you send it off. There's a lot better chance that you're actually going to pass the test of the graders as well and get yourself a Gem Mint card back. By the way, my friend Joe Davis from GotBaseballCards.com has this handy little tool for sale on his website. If you go to GotBaseballCards.com and you click on the PSA grading page, and then you scroll all the way down to the bottom, these are $24.95 with free shipping. Again, GotBaseballCards.com, go to the PSA grading page, scroll all the way to the bottom, and you'll find these for $24.95. If you're going to do any grading, this is a really helpful thing to have. The number 4 mistake that I made as a new investor coming back into the hobby, I didn't understand the exponential multiplier that star players can get and can achieve when it comes to their card prices. This, by the way, is a big difference from fantasy sports. So any of you out there who are big fantasy sports players, this is an area where you've got to change your mindset. Your fantasy sports mindset, if you come into the sports card world, this one will cost you. And here's the deal. When you're setting up your lineup, when you're playing fantasy sports, you're thinking, okay, I have a total amount of money to spend if you're doing an auction, or I have a total number of draft picks and a total number of slots, and I want to try to balance out my roster as much as possible. I want a very balanced roster, right? Whereas in cards, the more star power a player has, their value begins to go up exponentially. And let me ask you this. If you were a general manager of an NBA team and you were to create a new lineup tomorrow and put this team out on the court to compete for the NBA championship, choice number 1 is you have Luka Doncic and 4 scrub players. Choice number 2 is you have Trae Young, you have Shea, you have Aiden, you have Michael Porter Jr., and you have Jaren Jackson Jr., and that's your starting lineup. Who's going to have the better chance of winning? Well, of course, every general manager on the planet is going to go with choice number 2. They're going to say, wait a minute, I can get Trae and Shea and Aiden and MPJ and JJJ, and I can get them all. Of course, they're going to beat Luka and 4 scrubs. But in the world of sports card collecting, 1 Luka card is more valuable than those 5 guys' cards combined. Should it be that way? Perhaps not. Is it that way? Yes. Why is it that way? Because your absolute cream of the crop star players get an exponential multiplier over all of the players below them. As a player goes up in the popularity curve, the popularity curve is not like that in terms of card values. The popularity curve is like that. So the more popular a player becomes, the more rapidly their prices get away from everybody else who is part of the pack. And that's something you have to understand as a sports card investor. Unfortunately, it's not always about picking the most balanced group of players. Oftentimes, to really make money as a sports card investor, you got to figure out who that next superstar is going to be, that person that's going to get exponential returns, and you got to get on that person early. That's one of the big keys to being a successful sports card investor. All right, the number 3 mistake that I made as a new sports card investor was showing up at the National without enough cash. And this is true of any card show. If you go to a card show, and especially if you go to the National or another big card show like that, cash is king. And I showed up to the National with the intention of buying a lot of cards. I didn't have enough cash to buy a lot of cards. And I thought, well, no problem. I've got PayPal and I've got, credit cards. No, nobody wants to accept your credit card at the National. Maybe if it's one of the big stores that's selling sealed wax, maybe they'll take your credit card. But most of the dealers at the National have no interest in taking your credit card. And that's true for card shows as well. They want cash. A few of them will let you pay using PayPal, friends, and family, but a lot of people get skittish about that. And I tried to pay some people at the National using PayPal, friends, and family last year, and then PayPal put a limitation on my account because PayPal got the sense that I was probably out somewhere trying to pay a bunch of people for goods using friends and family payments, and PayPal said, we don't like that. And they cut me off for the rest of the National in terms of being able to send people money. So I was not able to make all of the purchases I wanted to make because I did not come with enough cold, hard cash to support myself through that show. So if you're going to any type of card show, cash is always king. The number 2 mistake that I made as a new sports card investor, I thought all positions were created equal. I thought that, let's take, for example, the wonderful center for the Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert. This guy is a great center. He is an all-world defensive player. He's won Defensive Player of the Year, I think maybe a couple of times. He is dominant. He is a dominant force for the Utah Jazz inside, and his analytics are wonderful. When you look at his analytics, they are great because they love this guy because this guy is an absolutely amazing defensive player. And guess what? His cards aren't worth anything. I mean, they're worth a little bit, but they're certainly not worth anything compared to a lot of his peers who have much more of an offensive game. Because the problem is, as dominant of a defensive player as Rudy Gobert is, he has only averaged 11.5 points per game throughout his career. And in the hobby, in the sports card investment world, people care about points. And that's true of its basketball, that's true of its football, that's true of its baseball. And that's why in baseball, your investment is generally better suited for your home run hitters than your utility players or than your defensive superstars or even your guys who bat for average. And that's not to say that all guys who bat for average aren't valuable. Certainly you've got guys like Ichiro, who is a wonderful average hitter, and his cards are nice cards to have. But for the most part, it's going to be your big sluggers in baseball that are going to draw more attention and command more prices. It's certainly your quarterbacks in football, because the ones who are throwing the ball all over the field and putting up lots of yards, you're exciting guys. You're Patrick Mahomes because he's got the capability of throwing for 500 yards in any game. You're Lamar Jackson because he's got the capability of running wild and running for 150 yards as a quarterback. Those are the guys people want to invest in. Those are the guys people want to collect. Occasionally a wide receiver or a running back, but they really got to do something special. For the most part, football is a quarterback game. For the most part, baseball is a home run hitter game. And for the most part, basketball is a three-point shooter or at least a high scorer game when it comes to the sports cards that are going to be the most valuable. I didn't realize that as an early sports card investor, so I was buying defensive guys and, guys who I thought were great overall players, and they were great overall players. But just being a great overall player doesn't mean that their card is going to escalate and move for really high prices. So another thing to think about. And the number 1 mistake that I made as a new sports card investor was assuming that I understood what certain cards would be worth and not checking the price history before I went to purchase them. And if you are going, and even someone experienced like me, I cannot make a guess or an assumption as to what a card is worth and know that I'm going to be right without checking the price history. Because there is a lot of funky things, very funky things that cause card values to do certain things in our hobby. So for example, just because a card has an autograph doesn't mean it's going to be more valuable. In fact, a lot of times the autograph versions of cards draw less interest than the non-autograph versions of cards, especially when you're talking about something like Prizm basketball. The autographs do not drive prices in Prizm basketball. It's the non-autographed color variations, the refractors, the parallels, that really drive the prices and the interest in Prizm basketball. And this is true with other sets in other sports as well. So having an autograph does not mean that that's going to necessarily be a more valuable version of a card. Same, by the way, with a patch, with a jersey patch or a swatch or a relic. Those things are fun to look at. Those things are fun to collect. And oftentimes cards with jersey patches or swatches or relics are less valuable than similar counterparts without. So simply having those things does not mean that they're going to be more valuable. And by the way, with serial numbering, having a card with a lower serial number, a card that's a 1 out of 10, does not mean that it's going to be more valuable than a card that's a 1 out of 25 or a 1 out of 50. There's a lot of factors that go into play, even within the same set. I've been talking a lot about Prizm because it's the hot card right now, the hot card in the sports card market with the NBA season in full swing. Well, even in Prizm, if you get a fast break Prizm number to 10, that is actually going to likely be less valuable than a Mojo Prizm numbered to 25. I believe those ones are numbered to 25. And so just because the fast break number to 10, they're not as sought after as the Mojos that are numbered to a higher number. So even looking at how many, of a particular card has been made doesn't help you fully understand what the price is or what the price should be. So it always comes down to price history. And it always comes down to looking at the history of what a player and what a card has sold for. And if you want to know a great tool for doing that, it's my brand new Market Movers tool. I developed a wonderful tool called Market Movers that helps you understand price history and helps you understand price movements and popularity of cards better than any other tool out there on the marketplace today. I would love you to check it out, and you can check it out by going to sportscardinvestor.com. It is available only to people who join my membership program. Go to sportscardinvestor.com to check out my membership program and to take a look at my new Market Movers tool. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode today. I would love to hear what mistakes you made as a new sports card investor, and you can tell me if you're watching on YouTube. Tell me in the comments below. If you're listening on my podcast, then go to my Facebook group or my Discord chat, which you can get to by going to sportscardinvestor.com, and let me know what you think. And I would appreciate a like for this video and a subscribe to my YouTube and to my podcast so that you can be notified of when I'm putting out new episodes like this. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody, and I'll see you back in a couple days for my next episode.